Well, hello. Jump right on in. You're at Father Fish.
How do you differ from Diane Waldstad's method? Could you tell us in your own
Yeah,
words?
yeah. Diana's book, her first book, uh, she she went through the entire process of a dirted tank, and then left the book with two problems. One of the problems was that the the uh, the nutrient level depleted after about a year, making it impossible for the tank to really sustain itself much beyond that. That was one problem. The other problem was that she used gravel as a cap to her dirt, and that allowed the dirt to leach through the water column, which in part caused the depletion of nutrients. But in addition, the nutrients were depleted simply by being used up. So I set out early on to solve those two problems uh, with enormous approval and support for the work she had done, following on the heels of Amano and Garf and Merle Cohen, who brought this system into the hobby. She built the science for it, but she didn't invent it. It was something truly that went all the way back to the 1800s when glass was first made flat enough to be able to build aquariums. And the very first aquariums were built with dirt, with soil. It was a common experience. That's how they kept them. So it's not anything new, but it's something that became passe and was ignored mainly because I think the transition occurred back in the 1970s when a good friend of mine, John Coleman, who was the head of the Shed Aquarium, was visiting uh, an aquarium in Madrid, Spain, on the shores of the Mediterranean, and discovered a system that was being used there in that aquarium, in which they were running water from the ocean through sand, through gravel and a grid in the bottom of their tanks and running it through and then reusing it, the so-called undergravel filter. John brought that back to the Shed Aquarium, implemented it throughout the aquarium, and it became all the rage in this country. Suddenly, the entire industry was caught up in the throes of the undergravel aquarium. Well, primary change that occurred at that point as a result of that was moving from sand to gravel. I remember when I was a child, the tanks had sand on them, no gravel. It was all sand. But then with that under gravel filter, it had such an impact and required gravel because the sand was too fine. It packed it, so it made it impossible for it to work. That then caused as as the as the gravel system, the the under gravel filter system began to demonstrate that it really was a failure as a system. Then then there were attempts to try to change that. And that's when people like Amano, people like Garth, people like Walstad began back to dirt as a substrate for the aquarium, but they were stuck with gravel. And what I discovered is that if you just put sand on it, that dirt does not migrate up through the sand. It comes through the gravel because water washes it out. But if you do a couple of inches of sand on top of that soil, that doesn't happen. The other issue, and it's one Amano discovered when he realized that you had to have some supplements built down into that system when it was first laid down. The Green Machine was famous for dusting the bottom of their tank with amano powders, which were all minerals, and then laying soil on that and sand on top of that. So I took that and began to develop a formula for what really ought to be in that supplement in order to be able to make it last long enough for the cycle to fully balance and fully cycle such that minerals were being fully converted and cycling in the system. So that's the basic difference. And to this day, Dinah Walstad has not accepted that system. She's not accepted the principle of a truly balanced, long-term, permanent system. And I still, although I found she and Bill Barr on their aquatic plant channel server, there are more and more people now claiming that the father fish system really does work. So they're not bad mouthing it today nearly as much as they were a few years ago. Hope that answers your question.
If I can follow it up, so just to put it succinctly, your system differs from Waldstedt in that your system uses sand. That sand is what you're saying is going to keep the nutrients down into the plant level, the dirt level, whereas the gravel that Waldstedt used would allow too many nutrients to go up and then get used or water changed out. Is that the idea, Father Fish?
Well, that's part of it. That's part of it. The other part is the supplement, which is a composite of minerals and other organic material in strain that we have added to, much as you would add fertilizer, except these are all natural ingredients that we add to the substrate in order to make it possible for it to last years um, without becoming depleted. So we try to put enough down in there so that it's going to survive 2, 3, 4, even 5 years until the minerals are able to fully cycle throughout the system.